All right. Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:30 p.m. It is Thursday, November 20th, and I'm going to call the special city council meeting to order. Would the city secretary please call the roll?
Mitchell,
Here.
Heiser, Medina,
Present.
Zapata, Harris,
Here.
McKinney, Tobias.
Present.
All right, 4 members present. We have a quorum. Next up is citizen comments period. I have one registered to speak, Ms. Lila Knight. You know the rules.
My name is Lila Knight. I'm here tonight speaking on my own behalf, even though I am on the Hays County Historical Commission and Preservation Associates and like a whole lot of other organizations. I'm talking tonight, I'm very concerned about the addition of bathrooms into the downtown park. There's just not a lot of space left in the downtown park for structures. And it concerns me because the price, well, number one, the price is like really up there. It's like almost $1 million. And secondly, we have bathrooms in the old City Hall or the Krug Center. And I know that that's going to be soon vacated by CAS, and I understand they don't want to clean the toilets or whatever. But I mean, how many toilets do we need in the downtown park? I mean, plus we also have land, on like 2 sides of the park where bathrooms could be constructed. Your staff and the consultants did make a presentation to the Hays County Historical Commission, but I'm a little concerned because when I saw the presentation for tonight, they apparently didn't take much of our advice, and you don't have to, although you might want to. But I do want to say that Old City Hall and Downtown Park, that's the second oldest building in Kyle, downtown. The first would be the D.A. Young building, but City Hall was built in 1912, and our depot was built in 1917. And I think there needs to be a little more respect paid to the history of Kyle. And I wanted to give a quote from Curtis Tunnell, who was the first state archaeologist in Texas. He was a good man. He's buried in the state cemetery, and he taught me how to polka. Okay, this is his quote when he resigned. He said, "I hope that someday when our grandchildren ask why this generation paved the countryside, dammed the streams, and filled the cities with concrete parking garages, they will realize that a few, like yourself, were protesting the dehumanization of the world." So, just show some respect. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the forms that I have. Is there anyone else who wants to come forward and speak? All right, seeing none, we're going to move now to executive session. City Council will now go into executive session to discuss agenda items 4A through I pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.087. Thank you.
Good evening. It is, we're back in, reason of the meeting. We're going to go ahead, it is 7:35. We're going to go ahead and close out of executive. There is no action taken. At this time, Mayor Mitchell is out at this time, so we have a motion for nominations for council member to conduct the meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that Councilmember Tobias serves as pro tem.
Second.
All right, a motion to be made for myself to continue the meeting. Motion was made by Dr. Harris, second by Councilmember Zapata. We all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all opposed, no. All right, we have passed 5-0. Okay, we are going to resume the meeting here. We're going to start off with the reports and presentations. To receive a report and hold discussions and provide staff feedback for the final design and drainage study findings for the Spring Branch Silverado section of the Vibe Trail project. And presenters Dave is Will Atkins.
Thank you. Good evening. A while back, y'all in City Council had requested a update for the Spring Branch section of the Vibe Trail that we are currently designing related to a refined floodplain study. So that is what we have tonight. And just to give you a few bullet points right here, we're going to discuss the alignment, where we are at on that study, the findings, evidence of no adverse impact, schedule, and then questions and feedback. And then here in a moment, I'm going to call up Nick DeBose. He is the person in charge with Schaumburg and Polk Incorporated. They are the people that are designing, they're the civil engineering firm designing the Vibe Trail for this section. And Mr. DeBose, if you want to come on up. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Council, thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Vibe Trail. I personally, so like Mr. Atkinson mentioned, I'm the project manager for the consultant who's designing this portion of the Vibe Trail. I'm super proud to be part of this project. I think I love being part of any kind of a trail project, and I love the Vibe Trail vision for City of Kyle. So we're super honored and proud to be part of this. Just to give you guys an overview, I don't know when the last time y'all talked about Spring Branch, the Spring Branch segment was, but what's on the screen right now is a map of the overall Vibe Trail system from the Vibe dashboard on the city's website. And the portion that we're talking about is Phase 1 of the Spring Branch segment, which runs between James Atkins and Veterans Drive. And so the Spring Branch Phase 1 segment runs between Western Cove and Spring Branch Drive. Connects the, I think, Plum Creek neighborhood and is it Brooks? Oh, the Silverado, and then also Spring Branch Drive. So Schaumburg and Polk did a preliminary engineering study of the alignment for the entire Spring Branch segment, which runs all the way, like I said, from Veterans to James Atkins. And you can see on this map, this is a property ownership exhibit showing which portions of property back when this was studied the city owned or where easements might have been needed. And you can see kind of outlined in red is the Phase 1 segment that we're talking about tonight. And just for a little bit of history, that kind of orange triangle on the left side of the Phase 1 segment was previously owned by the Silverado HOA, I believe. And then the city just purchased that last spring. So with that purchase, obviously the full design and construction of the Spring Branch Phase 1 segment is able to continue. And as part of that, the city had discussions with the city's floodplain administrator about the need for a floodplain development permit or floodplain analysis. So what's on the screen right now is the Spring Branch Phase 1 segment superimposed on top of what is currently the city's floodplain mapping for this area. That's a study that was done in 2014 through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, through USACE. And as you can see, part of the trail goes through the floodplain, goes across the floodplain, and some of it kind of travels within and adjacent to the floodplain. The feedback we got from the city's floodplain administrator was that a floodplain development permit would be required for this trail to go all the way to construction. And so that's kind of what we're here talking about tonight, is progress on the flood study that is necessary to complete the floodplain development application. So Schaumburg and Polk has completed the initial flood study of this area of Spring Branch. Part of that includes updating the hydrology to Atlas 14 standards, which are relatively recent. Those were not the standards that were used back in 2014 when the last floodplain model was developed. So part of our charge in studying the floodplain is to update to current standards, which is Atlas 14, and then analyze the impacts of the trail. So we've done that floodplain modeling. That floodplain modeling is complete. What's presented on the slide here is that we were planning to submit to you guys on this past Monday, and in analyzing the impacts of the trail to that floodplain, although they are super minimal, we still believe we need to make some minor adjustments to those construction plans to improve the condition after the trail is installed. So just to kind of walk you guys through floodplain development in this area, what's on the screen right now is the current FEMA map, which is what many of your residents might be able to easily find and reference, what they might look at. This is relatively old data and is currently not accurate to what the city uses for floodplain mapping. You can see this is again a page from the USACE study that is the city's current effective floodplain for the area. They're relatively similar. And then these are the preliminary results from our floodplain model that we've done. And if I kind of flip back and forth, not to make you sick, but you can kind of see that there's a little bit of detail that exists in this FEMA map. And these FEMA maps are generally, in this type of mapping, they're generally based on historical records and reports, not on specific models or anything like that. Some of that detail was lost in the 2014 study, and with the updates to the Atlas 14 data, some of those historical reports are again reflected back in this floodplain model. So this is a floodplain model up to the current standards of today, and you probably can't even see any difference on this map. But there's a yellow outline, which is the existing floodplain, and there's an orange outline, which is the floodplain with the proposed trail improvements. So they're almost right on top of each other. We're showing a decrease in the floodplain elevation in some areas, and in general, no increase in the floodplain. And there's some minor areas that we would like to be able to make better before we send this to construction. So we're in the process of making those tweaks right now. This is a map of the current 500-year floodplain, or the 0.2 annual chance event, right? The 0.2 ACE. And you can see, obviously, this is significantly larger. This goes out into the neighborhoods and onto the streets. But this also, both of these floodplains should coincide more with what has been experienced in the last several years, and what's likely to be experienced in the future. So like I mentioned, we've done the initial flood study with almost no increase in the floodplain, and we're currently in the process of making some modifications to the plans so that we can really minimize any impact to the floodplain that the proposed trail would have. And then we're planning to submit that to the city with updated construction plans, and should be able to follow this schedule. Like I mentioned, we're slightly delayed from what we had in the slide earlier, but I think this is still a good schedule. So we should be submitting sometime this month for a floodplain development permit application, along with updated 90% construction drawings, which account for the revised limits of the project to just the Phase 1 scope. And hopefully sometime next month, we anticipate getting floodplain development comments and city comments on the construction drawings. We would then resubmit plans in January of '26 and hopefully have very minimal comments issued, if any, from the floodplain administrator or from any of the city departments who would review it, and hopefully be able to go out for bid maybe in February of next year. Then start construction sometime in the spring of 2026. And at the moment, we'd probably estimate 7 to 9 months. That's probably being pretty conservative. It may not be that long, but just to be conservative, we'd estimate construction probably 7 to 9 months. So may be able to complete it sometime in '26 or early in 2027.
Okay, do we have any questions? Dr. Harris?
The houses along Jim Miller that are right up against the berm almost, their lots are consistently flooding every time. And this is an ephemeral stream. It's not, doesn't have water in it all the time. But when it rains, it really, really floods that area. Our trail is going on the top of that berm, right?
Not on the Jim Miller side, on the opposite side of the creek, yes.
Okay. So when we were originally talking with the residents, we were anticipating that the trail would go along the berm on the side of Jim Miller, right?
I wasn't involved at that point in the project, so as far as I've been involved, and this is, I think, this map, I think, is a couple of years old. I think what we've proposed to the city has always been that it would be on the north side.
On the north side.
But we may have, I'm sure that we did. We make a point to analyze multiple options every time we do a project like this. Putting the trail on the south side of the creek may have been one of the options that we analyzed before recommending.
Because we met with, we met with the residents there in Silverado. And they were concerned about the flooding in their yards and that the trail would make it worse. And
Yes,
we were
ma'am.
talking at that point about putting the trail on the top of that berm at the back of their yard.
So at the back part of Western, it's not Western Cove, but the Western Drive, at further upstream, if you will. So that's a future phase, Councilmember Harris, that is not funded through this specific phase. And so when we go further towards Veterans Drive and the undefined future, and when we fully fund that design, we will have to take into account further refinement of those plans.
Okay.
But you are correct. When we met with the residents out there, we went out from the trailhead right there where the bench is at Western Cove and went left. And where some of the fences are down, those
Right.
residents, I think it's at the end of Western Drive. So Jim Miller's a little
That's
bit
right.
further down.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
the portion that is just north of Jim Miller is going to be on the north bank, on the backside of Spring Branch Loop, and then it'll come down and swing down to Western Cove.
Okay. But the part that is going to swing down to Western Cove is not, we're not starting that one yet?
It is. So the part in yellow, the squiggly line that runs up and down, down to the cul-de-sac, that's Western Cove. And then where it moves north to where it intersects
Okay.
to the top of that rounded T, that's Hogan over on the left side with the alley. And then it goes east and downstream down
Okay.
to Spring Branch Drive.
Okay, so we're really not running it behind their houses
Not on Jim Miller, no ma'am.
or Western Cove?
Not Western Cove, not at this time. Between the comments from the residents and the funding that we have, we determined that this was actually achievable, and we are not moving forward
Good.
yet with everything moving forward upstream.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just concerned that, it's kind of do no harm. We're at the do no harm phase, but are we actually improving the conditions for those houses that are being flooded out? It's like a doctor should do no harm, but they really should heal.
Yes, our goal is always to make it better, but at the very minimum, it needs to be the same or better.
So we'll be working with those residents that have been getting flooded out to see what we can do to mitigate that. Because
In
we
term-
bought that, we've got that easement behind their houses.
Yes, we own the land. I like to refer to it as the triangle tract, the 7.4 acres that we purchased from Silverado. And so we don't necessarily need an easement for that.
I mean, we
But-
own the property, right?
Yes, we own the property directly, fee simple, if you will. But at the time we decide that we know we have funding in the budget in our 5-year capital program, then if we decide to move forward with that section, we will then look at our current plans that we have designed there, which is a 30% level, and then further refine it from there with the intent to make sure that we can absolutely make it better.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions on this side? Maybe for myself, what's the, when you're referencing the Atlas 14, if you could just kind of pick my brain as far as what type of data?
Sure,
that
yeah,
is for me.
the standard hydrology, when we talk about hydrology, that's basically rainfall and what happens to rainfall after it hits the ground and how we model that. The standard up until just a few years ago was based on data that was published in a publication called TR55, which was from 1955. Atlas 14 was a publication that the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration put out in the year 2014 of an additional 60 years worth of rainfall data, or 50 or 60 years worth of rainfall data, which statistically altered the rainfall values which ought to be then used, which would be recommended to be used in certain areas of the country. So, and then really just, I think, probably 5-6 years ago, municipalities and different localities started adopting Atlas 14 rainfall values as as a new standard for rainfall modeling, for hydrology modeling. And FEMA also has been, FEMA notified the public that they would be accepting and I think using, I don't want to misspeak, I'm not a FEMA expert, I don't specifically work for FEMA, but I believe FEMA had a hand in the Atlas 14 standard becoming kind of recommended everywhere. In Central Texas, what that has meant, some places in the country saw a decrease in rainfall values when they added the additional 40, 50 years of rainfall. In Central Texas, we saw the exact opposite. You know, you might have had a locality whose 24-hour design rainfall that we use to model floodplains might have been 9 inches previously with the old TR55 data, and then after the addition of the Atlas 14 data, now we might need to use an 11-inch in 24-hour rainfall to design for a 100-year. So that's generally the impact that Atlas 14 has had. So it ought to be more accurate data because it's also utilizing rainfall values from more recent years and it's more rainfall data. But in Central Texas specifically, all of the rainfall values went way up. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but in general, we've seen almost all floodplains. So what I should say is the calculated boundaries of floodplains expand. The floodplains themselves aren't changing. It's just where we calculate them to be based on those hydrologic parameters has changed.
Okay, there's a lot of that to do with just the geographic area of our area, because we get very, very little rainfall all year long, but when we get it, it's just tsunamis, right? And then that's where, like Councilmember Harris said, a lot of her residents get concerned because in that area, I've heard before, it floods. I remember when Councilmember Villalobos was on council with me, he would have those issues, especially in this neighborhood, where when it would rain, it would just flood people's backyards. And so I guess that when we're building this trail, I guess those are the big concerns when we start doing constructions and building it. We want to make sure that they don't have those issues to where, like she's stating, that when it rains, we don't have them flooding out their backyards.
Yes, unfortunately, the standards that were, so I would say that, I don't know if it's a change in hydrology, but really a change in data. The standards that were used previously, 10, 15 years ago, were, you could say that they were less stringent standards. The rainfall values were lower, so you would generally expect that, in general, some properties which were previously considered to not be in the floodplain may experience flooding and probably have reported to experience flooding, and that when updating to Atlas 14 values, you may see that the Atlas 14 predictions would put some of those properties in the floodplain. I think that's some of where those discrepancies come from is, I thought I wasn't supposed to be in a floodplain. Well, if we could have fast forwarded and got 40 more years worth of data sooner, we could have known that you really should have been. And really that's affected by the fact that we weren't keeping weather records. We don't have weather records going back hundreds of years in Central Texas. In terms of, I'm sorry, Councilmember Tobias, you had a second question?
It just kind of like with the theory of just the rainfall and just the area, like I said, and as we're building it, we want to make sure that we're not, infringing on those residents on that end. I just kind of wanted to get an idea for me what Atlas data was, and if it's streamlined across, just that way, if there's anybody out there that has the same question I had, they have an idea on what it would be. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and to answer your question, the other map that we included with the 100-year floodplain, the comparison that we're making is not between old floodplain data and now new floodplain data with the trail. It's what should the floodplain be without the trail if we use Atlas 14 data to now if we put the trail in with the Atlas 14 data, what is it? So we have an expectation of what the floodplain really should be with that Atlas 14 data, with and without the trail, is really the comparison that we're making. So I think we're trying to look at it from that perspective of what would you experience as a resident, and we're gonna have no adverse impact on you guys.
Yes. Well, thank you. Is there any direction that you need from us at all, or just the discussion? Okay, anybody else have anything? Okay. All right, well, thank you, sir, we appreciate it very much. All right, next we're going to continue on. We're going to move on to agenda item number 2, and we're going to receive a report and hold a discussion and provide staff feedback, or to provide staff direction for the proposed restroom facility at Mary Kyle Hartson Park, feasible study for the Krug Activity Center, and conceptual designs, concepts for the ornamental fountain located within Mary Hartson. And we have, again, Will Atkins.
Thank you once again. As stated, we have a presentation tonight regarding Mary Kyle Hartson Park for 3 different items. We have the restrooms on site that we are wanting to construct there. Also for a rehabilitation of the interior design of the Krug Center and how we want it to operate following the Kyle Area Senior Group moving over to 1500 AC Lane here in a few months. And also, what do we want to do with the fountain that's on site? Just an overview, we're going to have a project background and engagement item on there, the project team, the restroom design options, and feasibility and ornamental fountain update, and then questions and feedback. From a background perspective, in May 2025, staff and had selected Park Hill from the Parks Design Rotation List. And as stated, they have these 3 key tasks. As an important note, this scope does include coordination with the Texas Historical Commission, or THC for short, and the Hays County Historical Commission for Preservation and Compliance. So we want to make sure we had all the appropriate parties from both the state, the county level, and even the Parks Board, and then ultimately y'all. So at this time, I'd like to invite up Henry to provide the presentation for us. Yes, sir.
Good evening, council. Before I begin, a little more background information touching on our public engagement process. Starting on September 4th, we had our public open house to get feedback from the public. And we didn't know it at the time, but we were competing with the Dallas Cowboys that night for attention. The Cowboys won, so we had a solid 12 participants. Yep. So although we didn't have many participants, the information we received was very valuable, and we'll talk through that tonight as well. We've also, as Will said, met with the Texas Historical Commission a couple times. That's been invaluable to us. There's been a lot of ambiguity on some of these items, so their input has been very helpful. We also met with the Hays County Historic Commission in September. We'll talk through their input, their concerns, and as also the Parks and Recreation Board a couple times to give them updates, and we've incorporated their input as well. So as Will said, there's 3 tasks in our scope, and we're going to talk through each one of those, starting with the restroom building, then onto the fountain and the feasibility study. We'll talk about the process, the input we've got from all the stakeholders and the different agencies, share some concepts for each, and then we would like your feedback on each of those. I will pause at the end of each one of those tasks to answer some questions, get your feedback. I think that would be better than waiting to the end. I'm Henry Parker, landscape architect and project manager. I gave my team the night off tonight, so hopefully they're enjoying this rainy weather at home. So it's just me tonight. Looking at the site plan to get everybody oriented, I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with the site. We will be looking first in the lower right-hand corner of the site. There's a little dashed rectangle. That's the proposed location for the new restroom building. Then right in the middle of the site is the existing fountain. That'll be item number 2, and then onto the Krug Center on the left-hand side. So our task for the restroom building is simply to come up with ideas for the restroom center, designs for the restroom center that are sensitive to the historic nature of the site, right? We all know the historic, the importance of the Krug Center. The entire site is historically protected, and so our task is to design a building that is sensitive to the historic nature. And I do want to point out that the size of this building is intended to meet the needs of the park users. It is not going to be sized to meet the demands of market days. During market days, we will still need to bring in additional restroom buildings. So this will have 2 to 3 stalls on each side, not the 10 or 12 that you could need for a larger event, right? Also, I want to note that the intent is for this to be a prefabricated building. So this won't be a stick-built structure. This is prefabricated. We had gone through, or the city had gone through this process a couple of years ago, and there were some issues, so that building was actually installed at another location. But that in itself, being prefabricated building, comes with some challenges because there's only so much customization you can do on a prefab building. There's set designs and set palettes. So we're gonna have to get creative and choose the right manufacturer that can do this customization. So we're gonna talk about that more. So our first step is really understanding the existing building, understanding the architectural styles, the materials, the colors. In this case, it's the pink brick. And I don't know if this is true stucco, but I'm going to refer to it as stucco up in the gabled ends. It has the cast stone accents and also the brick articulation, these patterns in the brick that help break up the facade and create visual interest. So it's a very simple architectural style. And I don't anticipate any issues incorporating these materials and these motifs into the restroom building. So our first step was working with the manufacturer to identify a floor plan that is suitable really to this building and that we can easily modify and customize. Images A and C are the floor plan we chose, and that's just showing A is a 2-stall restroom, and image C is a 3-stall restroom. And the facades on that building, regardless of the number of stalls, is the same. So that allows us to use options B and D on either of those floor plans. So that's it's not either or, it's interchangeable. So option B is simply using the proposed facade as is from the manufacturer and applying materials, accents, and colors from the existing building to that facade. So it's a very simple idea here. We're not doing a whole lot of customization. We're just adding the materials and colors to make it match the Krug Center. Now, option D is a little more involved in that we are actually replicating the facade, the east and west facade of the Krug Center, and applying it to the restroom, the precast restroom. We're not adding that facade to both sides, just the front of the building, right? So the brick columns with the little curved archway in the middle, the brick articulation in the middle. These images don't show the drinking fountain, but there will be a drinking fountain between the two doors. So it's just, this was our first step. How can we, in the simplest way, take a prefabricated building and make it match or tie into the existing architecture? Looking at the cost of these buildings, the top two images, A and B, are the 2-stall floor plan. And with the embellishments, architectural style, that's really hard to read, isn't it? It's very small. I have to get closer. Look at the cost. So the 2-stall restroom building constructed on site is a total of $550,000. And then the 3-stall restroom building is a total of $612,000. So it's the cost of restroom buildings is always surprising. When we present this, it's kind of hard to understand why they're so expensive, but just keep in mind that these buildings are open to the public, unsupervised, 12 more hours a day. And they are magnets for vandalism and abuse, and they have to be built to withstand that. So I'm not saying they're vandal-proof or fire-proof, but they're certainly resistant to fire and vandalism. We've removed combustible materials. The plumbing is heavy-duty, and it's installed above ground at a chase so it can be maintained easily. And the finishes are vandal resistant. So if someone paints it or spray paints it, it can be somewhat easily removed. So like I said, it's not vandal proof, but these are built more like a school than they are a house. So that's where the cost comes from.
I had a question about that.
Yes,
Do
ma'am.
these costs include the technology that the other ones that we got last year, the year before, have we can lock them remotely, we can
Yes.
monitor them,
Yes.
we know if there's a problem, it tells us if it's got a flooding problem.
I'm not aware of that issue or that technology that was installed, so we'll have to discuss that. But these can be certainly built where you can lock them remotely. You can have a central control to monitor certain things. I'm interested in the flooding, but I'm not aware of that.
Yep. I don't know exactly what the technology was, but if there were problems, something probably, it monitored the water feed or something,
Okay.
so if it was using too much water. Do you remember, Chris?
Like a master valve that indicated when the meter was running, but,
Maybe.
okay, yeah, yeah. We have not discussed that, but we can certainly look into it.
Kids will turn on the faucets. Of course, if they were just they turn themselves off and
Right.
it's not as big a problem, but if the toilet gets stuck and it's running all the time.
Okay, so from here, we looked at a couple layouts. We started with, this was our initial layout. And just so you know, the building shown here is the 3-stall restroom building. So the layout would certainly work with the 2-stall building. It would just be a little bit smaller, so no problem there. But instead of just setting the building out here, we wanted to provide some seating, some landscaping, and, wide sidewalks that tie in with the existing circulation patterns. There were concerns during our public engagement process that this was adding too much concrete. It was adding too much impervious surfacing to the site. So these sidewalks could be reduced, narrowed up. We could use impervious surfacing under the picnic tables. There are ways to reduce the pavement, but keep the same or similar layout. But in response to those comments, we did a second layout, which is much more simple, removing almost all pavement. So we realigned the restroom so it aligned with the existing sidewalk, and we set it back just far enough to create a landing between the building and the existing sidewalk. You don't want your sidewalk opening directly up onto the sidewalk. You don't want people coming out of the building into the flow of traffic. So there's just enough room there for people to get off the main sidewalk, enter the building, or even wait to go in or wait for someone to come out. So it's a much simplified version. And this was in direct response to comments we got from the Hays County Historic Commission. That's where that comment came from. So looking at total cost of this project, site work, the concrete, pavement, and the restroom building, and I will point out that this is showing the cost of the 3-stall restroom building, so this is the higher end. Utilities, electric, and landscape, we're at $780,000. So it adds up very fast. Like I said, in speaking with the Texas Historic Commission, when we started the process, or with our first conversation with them, we believed that there was an existing, the previous permit was still valid. We learned that that was not the case. So all that to say that once we know what the floor plan is going to be, what the facade is going to be, we will be resubmitting for a new permit with THC. Since there was an original permit, I don't anticipate any issues with getting a new permit. With the Hays County Historic Commission, they were very concerned with the amount of concrete, limiting that, and they preferred realignment of the restroom to that existing sidewalk. So that's where the second layout option came from. Also concerned with protecting existing trees, and really there was mixed input on which facade they liked. There was concern that this new building should not replicate the Krug Center. It should simply tie into it architecturally with similar materials and colors. So, but then again, there was a few that did like the option D, which replicated the facade. So that brings us to today. With our timeline, the goal is to order this building as early as possible. It can be being built essentially while we're finalizing the CDs, and that way when the contractor gets on site, it's essentially ready to install. So our hope is to get that ordered in December, if we can. Once we know the facade and the floor plan, we can coordinate with the manufacturer. They'll need a couple weeks to fine tune their design, and then the city can order that direct from them while we're finalizing the CDs. And that way we can hopefully start construction January, maybe February. I think that's a fair goal. But what we need from you guys today is your input on whether or not it's a 2-stall restroom or a 3-stall, and which facade you like, or obviously other comments.
Does anybody have any comments right off the bat for the design and what he's needing? Councilmember McKinney?
Yeah, I like the facade with D. I like the idea of tying it with the Krug building so that they look like they go together a little bit more. I'm also thinking that for, an additional 50% in access for another, less than 20% in cost, especially when you start factoring about there's going to come times where, one of these stalls can be under maintenance, things like that, and making sure that we still have enough, adequate stalls available to satisfy the needs as much as possible anyway, that the 3-stall option is the better of the two, even though it is a little bit more. That's my opinion on that.
It'd be very difficult to go back and add restrooms.
Right. And when you lose one, that's 50% if you only got 2. Right? And I've got some mixed thoughts on the concrete layout too. Like I like the seating area, but I also want to minimize the amount of impervious ground cover we have.
Yeah, the area underneath the tables, that can easily be decomposed granite. It's pervious. Just by narrowing up the sidewalks a little bit, we can reduce the amount of pavement. So it provides the same circulation, but just cuts down on the main.
I think that actually improves and adds to the park by having the seating and the that little planting area there in the middle.
Kind of like a little waiting area on the side.
Well, and I
because
mean, how many times have we seen where we've had, people get stuff from the food trucks and they're standing around eating? I mean, I've done it myself.
That's true.
At market days and other events, things like that. I mean, just having a couple of places to sit helps. I think we have 2 picnic tables. Is that right? In Maricol Hartson Park? I think they're on the other side of the little gazebo there.
Yeah, there's roughly somewhere around 3 to 5. There's 2 concrete, and then there's obviously seating, various types of seating. But yes, there is very limited picnic tables on site.
I think it would be great to have those picnic tables that can be put in an area that's impervious cover. And when you think about as we develop around the park, the need to have picnic tables in that park would be a whole lot more. And it really lends itself to more activities if you've got more tables. So I like that too, Mike.
Yeah, so imagine like next month when we have the Santa's arrival and with the large amount of people that are there. Yes, it's not going to be designed for a Kyle Fest. We understand that. But on a daily usage or on the weekend or whatever we have that's going down there, I do agree with Councilmember McKinney. You need to have the most you can there, because if one, let's say family member, I've had them before, we had kids, one's got to go, the other one's got to go. And if we do have one unfortunate stall that's down, then that leaves the other ones out. So you want to start thinking ahead to where, 5 years from now, where are we at with these facilities? I do like the fact that you're looking at moving the alignment of the restrooms maybe away from like the major walkthrough crowds. You have the entranceways away from the major public. You can have like a little standing room, and the water fountain's a big thing for me as well. So I'm
It's
looking
also
at it
not too
more.
far away to be inaccessible too. Like, it's-
Exactly, yeah, you're right there, and the picnic tables are right. Councilmember Harrison and McKinney says perfect right there for when you have families that are needing to just have that little rest area there, and then there's the bathroom. You have some kind of shade, you kind of have some kind of seating as well. I kind of agree with the same kind of layout design that what the others are going with, so that's what I have. Anybody on this side? Councilmember Zapata?
I think I also do like the 3 stalls. It just makes the most sense as we try to redevelop our downtown and for what we aspire for it to be. And then I also do like having the taller one that kind of matches what the center looks like. I rather have it look like it was supposed to be there the entire time versus just looking like an addition. So, and I also really like the water fountain. I think that's a great idea, especially because you have all the little kiddos that are running around on the other side of the gazebo. I know that we have some concerns over the amount of concrete that we have, but do we generally know how much space we need, for example, if 2 parents have strollers that are walking side by side? Because right now, if we have those very narrow sidewalks, and parents literally compete, like with strollers. Yeah. So, because like you have to like pull one over and wait, and then let the other one pass and whatnot. So,
Passing strollers, I think 6 feet would be very comfortable.
okay.
5 feet is probably sufficient.
Okay.
But 6 would be very comfortable.
Okay, all right. Because I think as long as we maintain that, because it is a very family-driven area, then that's something that I'm comfortable with. Yeah.
Medina?
So is that, you're saying a minimum 6 foot, or minimum sidewalk width to accommodate 2 strollers? Is that-
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Or wheelchairs.
Or wheelchairs, yes, correct.
And I agree with the 3-stall as well and the layout with the picnic tables. Will the picnic tables have any shading over them, though?
These tables are actually underneath the existing trees.
Okay.
So
So
there's
they'll be already shaded?
no shade structure, but the trees themselves would provide quite a bit of shade.
Perfect. Yeah, and I agree with having the accessibility for wheelchairs as well and strollers, especially getting into the restrooms for the handicapped and the kids.
And I think we need changing tables in both sides, please.
Yes,
I agree.
Definitely.
Thank you for mentioning that. Forgot all about that.
Good on that one? Okay, moving on to item number 2. Okay, so task 2 is to develop design options for the existing fountain that, again, are sensitive to the historic nature of the site, right? So the first step, and really the challenge of this task was to understand what is and what isn't, or what was and what wasn't historically protected, right? What falls under that historic permit. And there was a lot of opinions and a lot of speculation at first. So it took some time, but the Texas Historic Commission was very helpful in clearing that up for us. So the entire park is within a state antiquities landmark boundary. So the fountain, just being within that boundary, is protected. However, the antiquities permit, the historic buildings and structures permit, HS 860, went on to specifically identify the fountain as a character defining feature and further listed specifically the concrete basin, the rock veneer on that basin, the 3-tier fountain, and the landscaping at the base in the permit. So those items essentially are untouchable. They're there to stay unless, as described or identified by THC, if we can identify another or a previous, we'll call it a documented historic use, then we can revert back to that use, right? We can't change this to a splash pad. We can't turn it into a rose garden. Our only option is to leave it as it is or to revert back to a previous use that we can document. We have to have photos or a newspaper article or something of that nature to essentially prove that this, at one time, that's what it was. So based on that, there was discussion at some point in converting it back to a pond. There was a couple of people said that they had that proof. They can provide that documentation. So that's one of the options that we're looking at, because in our discussion with the Hays County Historic Commission, they want to get rid of the fountain. That's basically what it comes to. They want that removed and to revert it back to the original use, which was a pond. Their other concerns were, well, we'll get into the concepts here in just a minute, but the shade structures that we proposed originally, I guess the materials and the style weren't as sensitive to the site as they could have been, so we've addressed that. They do acknowledge the desire for shade. However, they might, or proposed reducing the amount and changing the picnic tables that we're proposing to benches. So the big item from them is really eliminating the fountain and taking it back to the pond. We're going to look through the options here in just a minute. Let's see, so here's the options. So we're going to look at 4 different concepts, starting with the first 2 concepts are keeping the fountain as it is. So the fountain remains, the basin remains, but we've added in landscape around the base, and that is allowable per the permit. Outside, beyond the fountain, we've widened the sidewalk, we've added some benches, and we have relocated the fountain infrastructure. The pumps and the filters right now are located in the middle of the sidewalk. They actually sit up and prevent you from walking all the way around it. So that would be moved into a landscape bed somewhere. That, a location to be determined. But we've also opened up the sidewalk heading to the east. So now you can walk, all the way around the fountain and then, straight to the playground. So we've opened that up as well. I do want to pause here and mention that we are showing landscaping around. We're not proposing any specific species at this time. We're aware that y'all are in the process of removing all non-native plants and replacing them with native plants. So once we get to that point, we'll be sensitive to that and coordinate with the city as needed to make sure all the plants are in fact native. The second option, the same improvements to the fountains themselves, but we've widened the sidewalk even more, and we've added 2 shade structures, one on each side of the fountain, with more picnic tables. This is where, there was some concern about the scale of the shade structures. Maybe they could be a little bit smaller and replace the picnic tables with the benches. There was also concern expressed about in the event that perhaps the mayor was having an event out here and standing on the steps, that the crowd gathers along the sidewalk, but they also gather around the fountain. And having these shade structures could limit the number of people or their visibility in an event such as that. You know, I think that's a fair point. So that was a concern that was brought up. The third and fourth option are the same, pretty much the same options, but we've eliminated the fountain itself, and this would become revert back to the historic pond. You know, whether that's a lily pond or a koi pond, we don't know. There's a lot of questions to answer there. And even though we're eliminating the fountain, there's still, you know, infrastructure needed for the pond. There's circulation, aeration, in order to keep it from turning into pea soup. There's some things that have to be done to maintain the water quality. So that's not, you know, captured in this image, but it's something that would have to be done. And again, the pond with the added shade structures and tables. The question that came up, and I mentioned on it, or briefly mentioned it, was concern about the shade structures. So, you know, I think it was a good point. Our initial images did not necessarily communicate what those shade structures could be, but we've since updated it. The shade structures could certainly have the same materials we use on the new restroom building, the same brick, the same cast stone, same accents or embellishments. So I think making the shade structures blend with existing architectures is not a problem. But it was a good comment at the time. So the next steps are really deciding what's the best option. What do you guys prefer? Is it the fountain or is it the pond? And if it is the pond, we'll need to document it and address that with THC. I also want to clarify that this task does not go into construction documents or construction. This task is really just a conceptual study of what this space could be. So staff could decide at a later point that they want to proceed and it becomes a construction project. But at this point, it's really just a study of what can be done. So.
Anybody have any questions referencing the fountain? Okay, Councilmember Harris.
That this area really has an interesting history. That pond or fountain was just kind of put there with nobody's approval by a person who was not skilled at what he was doing.
You're talking about the three-tiered fountain?
No, the whole thing. Yeah, it was very informally done. And there was some debate about it to begin with, whether or not that should just be taken down and somebody more skilled do it, but they did not do that. I think a koi pond is probably not very practical there. It's not deep enough. The fish will die in the winter. I don't think there's any way of keeping them alive. And I don't know how we keep the kids out of it. You know, we really would have to have a strategy to keep the kids, even now, with just the fountain in there, the kids want to get in it. Either we just allow that's just fine, let the kids play in it, or figure out a way to make sure that they don't.
Yeah, the name for that is attractive nuisance.
Yeah.
There's liability that comes with that, so and you have that with the fountain as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a valid concern for
Yeah.
sure.
Or you just make it where the kids are expected to play there, like a splash pad.
Yeah, and Chris Scott, Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation. So one thing that I do want to notate is that the koi pond feature itself, that was language that was provided in that antiquity permit that was mentioned by Mr. Henry. So that's not necessarily say that there will be koi fish or there were koi fish. That was just a term that was used. So just want to acknowledge that. But to your point, the pond feature itself, currently it is being used. There is, as Henry put it, some activity occurring within the pond itself that you do have kids throwing rocks or people throwing rocks in it, getting in the water. There's been multiple occasions with CAS that have reported, hey, we had to take this person out, or we had to tell them to get out of the pond. So those things are duly noted, and that is something that we take into consideration. And part of the feedback, as identified, is purely just conceptual. So right now we're just talking about ideas, opportunities of what that could look like. Right now, there are no plans for us to be able to go into next phase construction documentation or even funding the replacement of that. Currently, one thing I do want to add is there is some repairs currently happening to the fountain itself. And so that's something that if you swing by the park, you will notice some small changes, but those are improvements that are currently occurring just based on the maintenance challenges that have been occurring. So just wanted to mention that.
I wonder if the Historical Commission would allow us to make it into like a little splash pad, you know, with the fountains, not very high fountains, but for kids that come on when the kids come into the area.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So it was pretty clear to us that there's only two uses that we can do: either maintain what's there or revert back to historical use. So there is additional next steps truly for this is for us to go through various historical records, work with Hays County, work with our internal historical records that we have already on file, and truly figure out what opportunities there are. So there's still a lot more discovery to be had for here, but they were very clear that the only two permissible items are keep it as is, just with the base improvements that were already approved by permit, or revert back to a past use that's historically documented.
If we have a photo of kids in the pond.
Surely that could be feedback that we could take back to THC and see what options there are. But again, right now we're just truly just taking some feedback, general consensus on direction, one or the other.
Anybody on this end? Councilmember Zapata.
I think, so I really do think shading is needed because people fight for the shaded seats all the time. And I think the best way to honor historical sites is to actually bring people to them. So I do like the idea of having the actual picnic tables instead of benches. But I'm wondering if there is an option for like retractable shading that could be looked into if we have like the idea that it might block people's view or whatnot. I just don't know how possible that is with the strict guidelines that I know that we have to follow.
I would have to look into that. You know, in a park environment, municipal setting like this, we're looking typically challenged with designing the most durable structure. So, you know, a retractable system. I don't know. It's a good idea. It's interesting, and I'll be happy to look into it. I don't know.
I have a whole bunch of interesting ideas, so no, it's okay. It's that what was the term? Attractive nuisance. I'm going to describe everything like that now. I love that. But I really do think that having some shading is necessary. I don't think we can just completely leave it vacant. It's only getting much more hot. It's not getting any cooler, and I think depending on what we can find documented on the use of like the fountain and whatnot, I think that'll really guide on like what can be done, I think. But yeah, I think that was my really big concern, is making sure that we really prioritize like maximum seating for individuals and the shade.
One thing I do want to add, there are opportunities for this to be somewhat featured into a nature pond. So whether that's lilies or different various components, those have been various conversations that we've had with our conservation team that we do believe that does meet the criteria based on its past usage, which could deter some activity that does occur within the pond. So that could be something that we can further explore as well.
Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, I think Nature Pond would be really nice to see in downtown, and then definitely with the shading and the picnic tables, because when we do have activities downtown, there isn't enough seating and there's not enough shade for everyone, especially when you got the little ones running around and they need to take a break to get out of the sun and kind of cool off. So I think that would be really nice.
All right, on, the way I look at it is when I'm looking at the fountain and you look at it now, I remember I did hear some residents did complain that how it was kind of falling apart. You know, it was some of the cement was cracking, and there was times where the fountain wasn't running at all. And so we would have to look at that as far as the maintenance on it itself. Do we have to stay with this type of structure where you have that outside rock?
Yes.
And then you have
The
to
rock
have
was
and then you have the
specifically
other,
stated.
you know, because I was like, if there's ever a time to where we could eliminate that outside rock, but still keep the fountain, but we could put barriers around the fountain itself to prevent those that want to crawl in, like I saw last year during the trail lighting or on that end where this little kid that just keep reaching his hand in and just kept wanting to splash around. And I understand that, yeah, that there's kids gonna see it because water does attract the kids. And so, but as far as the aesthetics it goes, is there any idea or any thought of maybe just upgrading the fountain itself with the color, the design, or the concrete, or if it's adding maybe marble or something else that's more attractive in a sense?
Yeah, coincidentally enough, one of the maintenance updates that I was referring to that have been conducted is there has been some staining that has occurred to the fountain itself that could increase that aesthetic. So that's one thing that we can do. I'm showing here on screen on the slide the wall that you're referring to. Because it is documented use and it's historic essentially, there's not much we can do there. But there are opportunities for us internally within the bed to incorporate landscaping and truly just lift that up. But I can tell you that there is opportunities for us, which we've already done just based on the maintenance protocols that we've had to date, that we have stained the fountain itself just to bring that aesthetic a little bit up to your point.
Yeah, okay. And then when we're talking about the shade itself, I know there's the idea of adding more, but then again, I'm looking at it that this is also an open park as well. So I get in the sense when you start putting columns across, and let's say I'm just kind of going by your diagram, and we invest in putting shade all the way across, you're only going to be able to seat maybe the most 5 picnic tables on each side.
Yeah,
But then again, you lose that outside sky overview and with that shade that's there, and then the columns itself, the cost of that as well. And so that's just my thought on that. I mean, I know we could add more trees, but would that take away from some of the scenic atmosphere from the park itself when you walk through and you have shade that's there and you have, I mean, I understand it does get hot, so I'm not disagreeing on that part where you need to be able to provide that shade for families. But as far as the openness of the park itself.
Yeah, I could give some perspective from a park standpoint and then from a landscape architect standpoint. But from the aspect of the flow and all that, as mentioned, there was some feedback that was given that obstructions could potentially happen. It could deter potentially just from the enjoyment out in the plaza. But there could potentially be ways that we can limit it, whether it's maybe just offering one side. I think the reason why it was done in this manner is just symmetrical in that sense, that you have options on both ends. But there could be maybe some creative ideas that we can take a look at and identify other ways that we can incorporate shade of some type to still accommodate and meet that call from the community. Because I would say shade is one of those top priorities that were identified in the PROS master plan. And so that is something that we're cognizant about. And so that's another reason why we're trying to incorporate these type of structures. So one of those components that we can do, take back and discuss with the landscape architect team.
True, that is true on that end. Like I said, having it on 2 maybe in the very back of the park where the playground is where you could add the shade, longer shade all the way around and still leave the front part open to where if, like you said, if there was an event, let's say the seniors do have something on the stair steps and they want to do a presentation or whatever, you'd have that back feelers as far as the shading around with the tables, but still have that open space in the middle to open up to the plaza versus having it on both sides.
Well, for shade, you have to consider where the sun is. Because if you've got it on the north side, the sun's going to be constantly under that shade structure anyway.
Right.
So
And-
it's just wasted.
And as I mentioned, right now, this is purely conceptual, so as we go further into the analysis, a sunshade analysis will be identified as part of those opportunities, because absolutely, if you're pointing in the wrong direction, then it doesn't really serve a purpose.
I will say that whatever we decide to do, anything we do, we have to, anything worth doing is worth maintaining. And so we need to factor that into the whatever
cost of
decision we
that.
do as well. I know it's maybe not a fair assessment, but my perception is this thing's been dry and empty more than it's not. And so a use that is, more long-term, I think needs to come into play.
All right.
Okay, so for direction to proceed, for finalizing these concepts, do we continue the conversation with THC and explore other historical uses?
Yeah, I guess what we're trying to get to. So
Yeah.
from what I'm hearing, consensus is driven more in the lines of trying to figure out what the historical opportunities are, reverting back to those, assessing it, maybe the nature element, as well as incorporate opportunities for shade.
Yes, sir.
And making sure that they're not interfering just with the mobility and just really the aesthetics as a whole. Is that safe to say?
Everybody good on that?
Great.
Okay.
I think it's also fair to get the input on the two seats that are not here right now.
Yes, that's true.
Before we make a decision as
Yeah,
well.
and again, this is something that's going to be coming back right now. This is just purely just in the initial stage of it. So we do have one more, and that's talking about the feasibility study of the Krug Activity Center.
Okay, all right.
Yes. Final task. Let's see, so I'm going to bounce ahead here to this slide here. So the feasibility study for the Krug Center, our task here is simply to explore how the building can best be used over the next 50 years, right? It's originally the building was the City Hall, and most recently it's been the home for CAS, and in between those it was several other uses. There was a stage in there at one time, so it has served the community well, but now we need to identify what's in store for the next 50 years. We also know that there's some code issues within the building and the restrooms, but we've also identified some other concerns within the building. Our architects came in and they did a thorough inventory, not just of how the building is used, but they've measured every room. Looking at other concerns, having a second floor is a concern without an elevator. So that's something that we certainly need to address. But based on that inventory, we developed a floor plan documenting exactly what is there. So we can use that as a base for potential modifications. So in our public engagement meeting, our public open house, we asked the community what or how they saw the building best being used in the future. How would they like to see this building used? The most common responses is that this needs to be a multi-purpose facility. It shouldn't be dedicated to one group or one use. It would be a great venue for small events such as wedding anniversaries, small wedding receptions. It'd be great for a small art gallery, an intimate performance venue, and also for meetings and basic classroom. So that's the key here, is identifying how this space is going to be used. And then from that, we can go through a programming exercise to identify how the rest of this building needs to be used. For example, do we still need an office? Do we still need a kitchen? If so, what type of kitchen do we need, and how big does that kitchen need to be? How much storage space and how many restrooms we have? So that's the process that we need to follow. And I'm going to admit that we got a little in front of our skis when we were discussing this. We jumped straight into looking at different floor plan options before truly understanding the full programming component. We knew the restrooms or the men's room specifically was not code compliant, and that was a big deal. It was brought up several times. So we jumped right in and started exploring different options for restroom layouts and how or if we could use that existing restroom footprint to make these buildings or make the restrooms larger. And the answer was no, we couldn't. And in doing so, we realized that in order to enlarge these restrooms, the west wall of what we're calling the Great Hall, it's the main large room, would have to be pushed out into that space, which is not ideal, as it reduces the size of that room, but it also starts blocking the windows. You can see on the north and south side how that restroom is built out and it blocks those windows. So we understand that's not ideal. So we looked at it with this is again a 2-stall floor plan, but also a three stall layout. And the encroachment is obviously greater. The impact on those windows is greater. So, we know that neither of these layouts is the answer. That wasn't the intent. The intent was to generate discussion and understand the issues and the problems. So they've been beneficial in that. But what we really need to nail down how this building is going to be used, what the primary use or uses are, and then spend some time understanding the programming and taking a more holistic look at this entire floor plan, right? What do we absolutely need and what do we not need? And that will lead us through the process. So in the design, after we did the floor plans, we took a look at what this space could look like. These aren't options. There's 3 different layouts, so it's not training room or meeting space or wedding reception. The intent is that this space could be used for all 3 of those, right? And the photos or the images do a great job of showing how the space can be cleaned up, adding the acoustic baffles in the ceiling to improve the acoustic qualities of the space, and also how we can clean up that west wall. Right now there's 6 or 7 different doors on that wall. So how can we clean that up, make it more aesthetic? But our goal here is really, I think I need to take a step back. Let's get your input on what this building needs to be, and then we'll kind of revisit the programming and come back here shortly with some more solid floor plans. We did present this to the Hays County Commission. They preferred the smaller restroom just because of the impact that it had on the great room. They had the idea, instead of having both male and female on one side, maybe you have male on the north and female on the bottom. Maybe when we look at the floor plan, we separate them to eliminate the impact on that space. They certainly did not like how those restrooms blocked the windows. They liked how we had modified the floor plan outside the kitchen so there's a serving window that now opens up into that great room. And if you're going to have a banquet or a reception, you're not going to be serving food directly into that space. You need a prep room or a vestibule of some sort to separate your serving space from your main space. So that was well received. But so our next steps are, again, is getting feedback from you, and then circling back and taking a more holistic approach with the programming and the floor plan. So I guess my first question would be, how do you guys envision this building being used over the next
Next couple of years.
couple of years? Yeah.
Do you have any feedback on Councilmember McKinney?
I guess I just always had envisioned in my mind that it was going to be, parks programming use. I mean, it being a centerpiece in the park itself. I guess I never even considered anything outside of that. So I might need to have to open up my own box for a little bit to and unpack some things before I come up with anything legitimate.
Councilmember Harris.
It is a great venue for performance. Put a stage in it, even if it's a fold-up stage, we move out of the way. Some risers. We don't have any performance area anywhere in the city, and that's
idea.
a shame, because we do have artists who like to perform. When Kaz has their concerts, we did the concert this last weekend, and often they're really well attended, and sometimes they're not. But I think if we did use it, at least, on Saturdays, Fridays and Saturdays for performance, that could be really a benefit to that whole area.
Any others in? Councilmember Zapata.
I think I really do like the idea of the kind of Great Hall layout. It's something that where, as I was like block walking and talking to folks about downtown, I've met like a lot of other individuals who have said like, hey, like, there's also no affordable wedding venues like really close by. And being able to have like a micro wedding downtown would be a way to commemorate that. And even in our arts master plan, the one thing that people felt really drew them to art and the architecture here in the city is the memories that were made because of it. And so being able to do those things and accomplish those things, I think, is really important. So I really do like that idea. I had attended the open house that was had. And one of the questions that I had was, I know that the two options right now, concept 1 comes out about 5 feet and concept 2 comes out about 8 feet. And I had proposed a 6 feet option to have the 2 stalls, but have the smaller one just a little bit more wide, in order to allow for like parents who have to take in little ones, because kids get really, they like to like duck under and whatnot, and like just it gets really cramped in there really fast. And then the idea of just like for plus size individuals, and including like in the men's restroom, being able to have more space to actually enter the stall. I know that we want to make sure that the windows aren't covered, and it doesn't seem like that's something that we can avoid either. But I don't know if that was like still a possibility to get that the 2 stall, but have one of the restrooms be a little bit more wide.
Yeah, right now, the whole intention of a feasibility study is really just to start sparking ideas for us to truly identify what those needs are, kind of like Mr. Parker was mentioning. Going back to Councilmember McKinney's comment about park programming, we do still envision that facility being a heavy parks programming facility, but also having the multifunctional aspect, just like 1500 Daisy, the Cal Community Center. Have the flexibility to rent out for quinceañeras, weddings, you name it. There's opportunities for us to have that flexibility, art galleries and so forth. So right now I think we could probably play with the widths from 4 to 8 feet, whatever that may be. we're also trying to really identify, does it make sense? That's kind of the question being asked. Do we value a kitchen? Because we could easily probably just flip the restrooms to be on this side and just keep the same wall sizes right now. So right now, truly the end result, what's going to happen is Park Hill is going to be providing us with an option. Here's all the various layout possibilities that could occur for council to make a future decision if they want to redesign that space and for us to take it into next level into preliminary design. Then at that point we can at least identify what the various options of various layouts are for us to start having that already in the bag, so to say. But in order for us to be able to make those decisions and inform council or future councils on what that vision may have been at that time.
Okay. I guess my next question then would be, I'm not sure as to maybe how the office space would be utilized. Like if it was an option to move the office, or if we remove the office space and then bring the serving and prep, like if we were to move that, we kind of open up a large area, I guess, right there, and maybe we could bring the storage back a little bit too with it. I don't know, I'm just trying to create some ideas and spark some ideas about how do we expand the Great Hall space and also not cover up the windows on that side as well. Because if we take back that office space and move storage down and move prep and serving down just a little bit, then we'll be able to unblock the window on that side.
And that could be something we could look into.
Okay.
I almost want to say too, that if you're going to block windows, the ones on the west side, I think, make more sense. You really can't see them from the Great Hall anyway. It would probably decrease costs when you think about heating and cooling and things like that. I don't like the idea of blocking a window at all, but I definitely don't like the idea of blocking it in the Great Hall.
Yeah. Well, these are great conversations to have, council, because again, as we're still talking about revitalizing our downtown area, okay, and our downtown centers and so forth and buildings. This has always been a key focal point for our city. It's always been our downtown. We've always said downtown, the park was a focal point, and this building right here is very important. And I agree with a lot of the comments that are made here. You want to be able to keep it still as a hall. You want to be able to rent it out for, we've rented out, I think, twice already, once for my son's birthday party. And we also did it for some other city events. So I think the storage could be used for your chairs and your seatings and so forth. But we're also excited that the community center senior building is being built across the way now. Actually, I drove by there. I think they installed the new doors. But I think they look nice. It's nice. But going back to this, we would have to start looking at what's the future use for this area. If it means parks programming, maybe that office space upstairs could be used as classroom, a small classroom, or an office of some sort. But it might be too small. I mean, again, we're still limited space. But as far as the kitchen area and the dining area, if it was probably maybe just an area to where you could just use it for a small amount of serving for whatever it is, and then just maybe redesign the area, if it's the flooring, the lighting, to make it more like a council member Zapata says, when you have weddings, or if you have town halls, or something like that, or you want to have some kind of city function or event where you want to bring residents to, and you could have that open space, and you also have the facilities for the bathrooms. Even though we're looking at building restrooms outside, you can still be able to make it more modern in that sense. Get up to code as well.
I think all that is great feedback. The one thing I do just want to point out is the upstairs option is, if we do start working on upstairs, an elevator is triggered. There's all these other things from architectural aspect that do trigger if that's an option. So at this point, that's not necessarily feasible, but those could be things that we explore down the stage as we start talking about the reimagination or maybe remodeling of that facility.
Yeah.
To clarify, without an elevator, the second floor is truly not a public space. Right now it's identified as storage, and that's, although it may be being used as something else.
Yeah.
Legally speaking, without an elevator, it's not a public space. And
Yeah, and then you'd have to also make it ADA compliant and everything else, and that then becomes another cost on that end. Yeah. Councilmember Medina, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I think if we were able to repurpose this into a venue that citizens could come and rent out from the city, bring in a source of income for the city to offset other costs in our budget, birthday parties, wedding receptions, retirement parties, just different things. And then as well, having it available for city use, that would be a great function to have. And you'd want to maintain a decent size kitchen area for those events that are serving food. And then the restrooms with, I agree with the Historical Commission, no less than the 2 stalls would be a good idea for that as well. And then the good size storage to store the tables and the seats when they're not being used for all the different functions. And then incorporating some AV equipment for music, for sound, for video, and functions like that.
Could there be an option, like what Councilmember Harris says, if we were to have an area to where they were to be able to have a stage installed, like, you know, to where they have the platforms and so forth, to where if there is wanting to have poet readings or a play or of some sort of that end, to where stages can be, maybe not on site, but they could be able to be installed for that type of seating and so forth.
Yes,
I
sir.
think that's a great
Absolutely.
idea, too.
And I'm up here because we would be remiss if we didn't share the public input that we gathered. It was small in quantity, but it was very qualitative for us. But it's like unanimously, everyone that took the time out of their day, despite being a Cowboys game, came and said, we really want to see this maybe be like an arts and event center. We want to see maybe some pop-up art galleries, maybe some small theater productions. And so there's a lot of options you have with that. Dr. Harris, we discussed maybe having some risers that you could stow away, make it multi-purpose, but this is something where we could really showcase, you know, some of the great visual and performing arts in Kyle.
Good, especially when we have our kayak group. That's, you never know, they might want to do some kind of special projects on that end. Right, good. All right.
I think
We're
that's all the
good?
feedback
Good?
we need. Yep.
You were good? All righty. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And we're going to continue to keep moving on to the last agenda item, which is going to be agenda item number 3, receive a report and hold a discussion and provide staff direction for the proposed conceptual plans to redesign Steeplechase Park and Lake Kyle. And it's presented by Director David Lopez.
Good evening, honorable council members. According to the Parks and Recreation, or PRO's master plan, the greatest identified need for our parks by not just national standards, but by public input, is the maintenance and upgrading of our existing parks. The first step in a very strong rehabilitation endeavor is proper planning. So we must have proper surveying, site analysis, understanding of the site constraints, and proper arrangement of our assets to ensure that we're relevant and meeting community needs holistically as a park system. So earlier this year, you, the City Council, approved a contract with a great landscape architectural firm, Dunaway, to begin site planning of 2 of our most beloved parks on the east side within council districts 2 and 6, namely Steeplechase and Lake Kyle Park. And I have a spoiler alert. There's also a bonus park that has been included in this process, which we'll share more on later. So at this time, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Jarrow and Kelsey Ross of Dunaway to the podium to begin sharing the beginning of what we think will be a very impactful story on the future of your parks that will someday result in them being amongst the best parks in the region for a happier and healthier and more sustainable Kyle, Texas.
Well, good evening, Council. My name's Elizabeth. It's been really unique to listen to your special session tonight. You zoomed out and you talked about a drainage way and big vision for a floodway. Then you zoomed in on a lot of detail. And so you've had to go big vision down to detail. Now we're going to zoom out just a little bit more. So hang on for the ride. But, one thing that I want to say tonight is thank you. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, and David and I were even talking about this earlier, that on my drive down here to join our Central Texas team that's really been diving into this and enjoying helping put together some concepts for y'all, we get to design parks every single day. And you guys have trusted us with over 160 acres of your park system. And this is a special moment tonight where we get to hear your input on some of the initial ideas that we've been able to come up with. So thanks for having us here. We're grateful that we get to do that. I'm grateful that I'm up past my bedtime and I get to talk about parks. So here we go. What I'd like to do first is kind of set the stage for the project, let you know where we are. I'll talk a little bit about the team that's working on it. I'm going to give you some basis for what we're going to build up to, which is the concept alternatives later, which we definitely want to hear your input on. But you guys have already been in a big planning stage. I mean, I don't have to tell you and remind you guys the growth that you've been going through. And it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of dedication and intentionality to be responsible with the resources, especially your parks that you're stewarding. So we did use the planning, the PROS plan especially, that you've already gone through. So we've used that as a basis for what we've gone through. We've looked at each site and we've gone through some layers of analysis. I'll go through those very quickly. And then we took that and we've formulated some very initial ideas. But as David mentioned, you can see this timeline here. We started in early summer, and of course it was blazing hot out there, but we got to spend a lot of time out with John Davis and with Chris and David, Amy and Will out on each site and really get to know the nuances of how people use them. We saw people out enjoying the splash pad. We saw Texas Parks and Wildlife out setting bait so that they could photograph raptor birds that were coming in. So it was great activity. We got to see the parks in the way that people use them. So it's a good experience for our team as we think about how to develop new concepts and give you the upgrade that Kyle is looking for. So moving into the fall, we were able to put together some programming, these initial concepts, and your Parks Board has had a chance to react to these. So this is that these first couple of boxes are when we are listening and we're learning the most through this process. So really want to hear y'all's comments tonight, but after this, we want to hear from your public. So this point in the concept development that we're at is we're testing some really big ideas, and we need to make sure that, first of all, we've got the puzzle pieces right, that we're including the right program items in each park. But then as we start to test the spatial arrangement of those, we certainly want input from you guys as well as your public. So that's where we are. Our target is to be complete with the process early next year. So again, my name's Elizabeth McElrath-Gerald. Brendan Whitstruck is our project manager. He had a family item and was not able to be with us tonight, but he has really been running the day-to-day of the project. And then Kelsey Ross is the assistant project manager. And then we also have other team members that are back at the office, not now, but they are working hard on the project and enjoying learning more about these parks. So what have we heard? David gave an introduction for me to talk about these concepts, but from day one, David and his staff have given us the vision for what these parks need to be. And this is really a summary of what our team heard early on. These destinations need to be uniquely Kyle. We want to make sure that they're flexible. They need to be extraordinary and really express your city identity. But we also realize we need to have a balance of preserving and conserving your green spaces, but still allowing folks to have access to them. Because you're serving residents, but you're also a steward of your natural resources. So that balance was very important. And we summarize those in the words, restore. John Davis is doing some great restoration work out at Lake Kyle. He's been a good resource for our team. But restore, celebrate the events that have been talked about tonight and that I continue to read about in your publications are really becoming what Kyle is known for. So adding spaces where you can continue those celebrations is important to these concepts. And then connection. We've already talked about the Vibe Trail. That's a key connector through both of these concepts. Touching on the pros plan, you've already done a system-wide analysis, and this is really serving as a basis for our plan. The one thing I will note about this slide is how strategically Steeplechase and Lake Kyle are located between Waterleaf. Of course, Kensington is nearby, and those are such great natural resources for you, especially on the east side. Just noting their high visibility and in and amongst neighborhoods where this access to green space is very important. So a couple of pieces of analysis that you'll find in our final master plan report. These are just some samples. We think about the social watershed, and really that's just a fancy way of us saying who is living around the park, who is in close proximity to it, and what type of user groups do we need to think about when we're considering program items and the spatial arrangement of those. What you see here is shaded in purple. That's about a 5-minute walk from each park. And there's a national initiative to try to make sure that every resident in communities is within about a 10-minute walk of quality recreation. So it's called the 10-Minute Walk Initiative. But this is great access and good walkable access from a neighborhood perspective into each one of these parks. The ecology, this is something that, of course, we can't ignore. We spent your first presentation talking about the floodway, and the colors that you see on this are almost everything is in blue in both parks. It is almost fully in the floodplain. We know that can be, do you have a question? I'm sorry. But we know that can be challenging from a development standpoint, so those are often leftover pieces of land. But we love to get those for parks because you get a very diverse, you can get diverse species, whether it's flora or fauna in floodplains. But that's also around water where people want to be. You just talked for, 45 minutes about a small pool, a fountain, and the attraction that water is. Think about the draw of Plum Creek and Lake Park and the waterways that go through these natural resources. The next thing our team did is we just took a general inventory of what's there. So that's the first place that we start, of course, at Steeplechase. Probably the biggest thing that it's known for is the dog park and the splash pad and the athletic facilities that are there. I know it's a big destination for disc golf, so we want to make sure that we're considering all of these different activities that in some ways can compete with each other, but if we arrange it right, they can really complement each other. And it's interesting, it's about a 40-acre park, and you'll hear us in the presentation refer to it as a neighborhood park, and that's a large neighborhood park. And typically neighborhood parks are much smaller. This one, in my opinion, functions a little bit more like a community park. So you've got a greater mix of activities that can serve both the neighbors, but then also a broader reach in your community. So now switching over to existing conditions out at Lake Kyle. Of course, we've got the playground that's there, the new fitness stations that have been installed. You really have this cluster of activity that's up by the parking lot, and it serves as your entry. And then there's pretty much one trail that takes you out to the lake. So you've got this 1 or 2 touch points to get you out to the water. And those are very popular. And you'll see that in a couple of the concepts coming up. We have some different ways that we can treat that, but that's really part of the magic of this park is the water feature. But then it's also surrounded by a lot of the conservation areas that are in active restoration and turnover of species under John Davis and his group. All right, well, this looks like a complicated slide to look at, but what this helps us do, now we're back at Steeplechase, but what this graphic helps us do is understand where we have overlapping existing uses in parts of the park. So where you see the patterns get really complicated, those are areas that are question marks to us as to, we want to make sure that we have the right balance of activities in those areas. So you can see there's a little bit of a red zone through here, and so there can be some use conflicts. And that basically follows Plum Creek on this one. And it's where the disc golf and the edges of the fields and some of the trail area overlap. So we've done the same type of analysis at Lake Kyle. And you can see that there are fewer of those, but this is a much broader, wide open space. So that makes a lot of sense. But we do have a few areas where there is some overuse or some overlapping program items. Namely, at the north end, there's a storage yard that's used for maintenance activities. But we know that this big, almost beige open space in the middle, that's the home of Kyle Fair, right? So balancing day-to-day use as well as your festival use is really going to be important as we develop the concepts further. So those are just samples of some of the layers of analysis that our team goes through when we think about these spaces. But we also start to think about character imagery. And when we looked at the PROS plan, we've heard from your park staff what the vision wants to be for these parks and the quality that they're expecting out of them. A couple of things came through. Overall, we need shade at these parks, right? So shade, connection, and making sure that we're balancing preservation and conservation is really going to be an overarching theme. There's an opportunity for the architecture to be iconic in these parks. And our concepts will illustrate that, so I'll get to that in a second. But unique to Kyle, unique to these parks, memorable, and really announce your arrival and make you feel like you've arrived at a place that you know is going to be a special experience. So we have that opportunity at these. So there's a few more other examples of that can take on a lot of architectural styles. And then thinking about this in terms of play. Because yes, you're gonna have festivals here, you're gonna have events, but on a day-to-day basis, what does play look like? Is it walking along the Vibe Trail? Is it going to the dog park and throwing the ball with your dog? Is it going to a signature element like this that helps become part of what these parks are known for and remembered for? There's just this opportunity for some very signature elements to help make these the destination that I know that you guys want them to be. So here's a slide that shows you some very high initial ideas, a concept A on the left and a concept B on the right. And I know there's a lot of colors and shapes going on, but what you'll see is the colors are going to move around, and we'll do the same when we look at Steeplechase here in a couple of minutes. But the green, those stand for the conservation and preservation areas. And these are proposed. Some of them are existing as well, but these are proposed high-level ideas. And the pink represents more of neighborhood recreation. So that might be playground, that might be a splash pad, that might be, but areas of higher activity will be the pink. And then orange is going to end up being transition spaces between that balance of programmed activity where people spend a lot of time, or maybe there's a higher volume of people, with the green where we want to make sure that we have a preservation and a conservation ethic. And of course, the red represents the Vibe Trail. So you can see there's some differences in how the Vibe Trail is treated throughout the park. So in A, I've got a couple of layers here just to remove some of that clutter and help you see these spaces a little bit more functionally. So in concept A, this one is really, to me, the concept A is really about preserving and educating about the natural resource you have in Lake Kyle amidst your city growth. You know that you're going to continue to have population growth. You know you're going to have events that will continue to grow from what they are today. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that we're respecting and upholding these restoration areas. So you see the green spaces are very much like they are today. So they're not much larger, they're not much smaller. But this is also about taking what you do at Kyle Fair and upgrading that. So this is an upgrade at the center where it says event lawn. There's a more intentional chain of spaces that start from the road, gateway in, cluster of recreational activities, out to your event lawn, and then there's a transition edge at the waterway. But this is also about expanding your recreation activities. I talked a second ago about how pretty much there's one concrete ribbon that gets you out to the water's edge here. In this concept, there's an opportunity for us to have many more touch points along the edge of the water. So then in concept B on the right, this one is about taking what you have today and not just accommodating your growth, but it's about expanding these spaces with your growth. So it's about creating a signature place with architecture as a destination. It's about expanding your event offerings and your performance opportunities. So you can see there's a large transition orange shape in the center. Over on the left, there's the recreation amenities that are there today. But then there are two band shells. So the idea on this one is your Kyle Fair can now have a performance home, and it would be more of an architectural iconic piece that is that's on the event lawn and helps to create not just it helps to create a visual destination and helps to define the architecture of the place. This also expands on your conservation areas. There's a sculpture garden that's included in the conservation area toward the lower part of the screen. There's new access to those conservation areas and a few new features. So what Concept B does is where it expands your offerings for Kyle Fair, it also expands your access into the conservation areas so that you can use those as educational opportunities. And what that does is it can create a sense of stewardship when people learn about the plants that they're seeing, the wildlife that's there. They can learn the appreciation for it because they've had access to it. Keep going here. So then thinking about access throughout the park, the difference between A and B is that in A, the Vibe Trail comes in from the north, and then there's a loop around the event space, and then it exits to the south along the roadway. In B, there's the same access, but there's also a loop all the way around the lake, and there's also a signature bridge that takes you from the gateway across the event lawn and across the lake. So that's even a more unique opportunity for us to have access to the water, a potential iconic architectural piece. And these become photo ops. These become places that people, it becomes a free overlook, right? So this bridge across to the other side really begins to open up the park. Of course. Yep.
Will the Plum Creek Conservation District allow us to put a bridge across the lake?
That is a great question, and we asked ourselves that immediately. So we've already been in contact with them, and they don't have a problem with the bridge.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've
Thanks.
approved that up to this point. So in this one, this shows where the pink bubbles or the amenities or your destinations around the park would be located. And again, in A, you can see that they're more consolidated where you expect amenities to be today. But there is an upgrade to all these. So there are new architectural finishes. There are new trail connections. There is a small stage, and one thing that I didn't mention in A, sorry to go backwards, is there is an event band shell that would be along the right side of that large event lawn, and it would be backing the water. And so, or the water would serve as a backdrop behind that band shell. So what you end up with is from the road, you have a clear visual invitation in to the band shell, and then you have the water as a backdrop. So what that does is there's some symmetry there, and then you've got the conservation pieces around that, but it really clusters your most high volume activity toward the center in that concept. And you can see how it spreads it out for your future expansion a little bit more in B. But you can see where the architectural bridge is, and then there is a potential up on the high point. There's a potential for the neighborhood park that is just outside of the City Kyle or Lake Kyle Park limits to become a lookout point. When we were out there with John Davis, we went through the conservation areas, and of course they had us on four-wheelers, and so we get out to the backside of the park, and it was magical when we got up on that high point and we looked back toward the water, and you saw the water tower, and you saw all of the green space, and you saw Kyle in the distance. That could become such a picturesque place. So we really knew that it would be a miss if we didn't at least mention it to you guys as being a potential part of the park. Four Seasons, thank you. It's the Four Seasons Park, right? So I don't have pictures in this presentation of that, but if any of you have been up on that high point.
It goes along Plum Creek, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It's great views.
Been out there.
So that really could be a magical place in either concept, honestly. In concept A, it's more of a neighborhood park, light touch, where it might have some nature playground equipment. But in B, we really take advantage of that bridge to get folks across and have an architectural piece that's up on the high point. So it could be a very special place. And was a surprise to our team as we were spending so much time on the site. We're always thinking about access and parking. I know that there are some new parking improvements that are going to start in January. Is that correct? Yeah. So this is really us just documenting the existing parking that's going to be there, but it's over 200 spaces, if I'm not mistaken. Steeplechase is the 200 spaces. Sorry about that. But I know that there's a rideshare program for Lake Kyle for the big events, and the idea on both of these is to make sure that we have enough parking for day-to-day use, and we think about parking solutions for when you have really big events.
If I could add real quick on that, David, have we looked at expanding at Lake Kyle, the parking? Because I know we have it right. We have the parking that ends like right at the Cross Fitness section, right? The court. Were we still looking at expanding a little bit more further out?
Yes, sir. That is part of these conceptual plans. Is find the right sizing and the spacing needs for the programming. First, we need to really decide on the type of programming. Right now, we know it's used for Kyle Fair, but you're hearing about a lot of wonderful upgrades to really enhance
Yes.
this park, and we absolutely make sure that parking accommodations are there.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so moving on to some imagery of what some of those spaces might look like. And of course, when you talk about a band shell, there's a lot of architectural forms that could take. This is just one example. It would be very important for that architectural piece to have some flexibility so that maybe it serves as a pavilion for day-to-day use, but then when you do have an event, it can be easily transformed into a stage that would be appropriate for the size event that you're having. Nature play, there are a lot of options for us in the industry to choose different pieces of equipment that either mimic that or introduce it, event lawn, and then even the idea of having additional bird blinds and wildlife viewings. We talked about those touch points to the water, but there's a ton of wildlife education that can happen and be experienced at Lake Kyle. So here's some big ideas for some of the iconic architecture that that could happen. That can even happen in your playground. I know you have, is it at Waterleaf? You have some pretty unique play equipment and concepts for that, yeah. So in comparing and contrasting A and B, really what A is about is having, I'm just gonna see if I've got that here. Yeah, this one pulls it together. But really in A, you have your event space, you have your Vibe Trail connection, you have a rearranging of some of the amenities that are at your entry today. You have this iconic band shell that can have Lake Kyle as the backdrop, and you definitely have these expanded touch points to the water as well as into the conservation areas. So it's very much taking what you have today and building on it. When you look at concept B, you see there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more colors. The same pieces are there, but the connections through the bridge, getting you to special places in the park, like up on the high point, having not just one band shell actually, but a couple of different stage points. It gives you the flexibility to take that large green open space and program it for large events, for small events, and everything in between. So I'll pause there because I do want to talk about steeplechase next, but the most important thing to us right now is, do we have the program elements right? And as we're starting to think about them spatially, are we moving in the right direction with either of these? You know, oftentimes, you guys have been through this before, oftentimes it ends up being a blend of the two concepts. So would definitely love y'all's feedback on which of the concepts or what you like about each one.
Anybody have any feedback real quick on Councilmember Harris?
On B, I don't notice a fishing pier.
On B, right. So on that one, there's going to be shoreline fishing opportunities. And what we talked about with John, we're building some smaller observation decks. And so those would be places that it wouldn't be a formal pier necessarily, but it would be a touch point to the water that somebody could stand on on an accessible structure and be able to throw a line into the water. So there's those opportunities in either. But then also, just having that bridge over the water is probably going to be a big draw.
Yeah, I want to make sure we retain the fishing because that's a very popular fishing lake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was also, you're talking about the fishing. I've been there before to where you still have a lot of high grass that's right on the embankment. Is there a reason why we have so much of that there? Because when people do go fish, like you're saying, that there's only a certain spot that people can go to. But if you go around some of the areas, that's what I was also going to mention here, would there be a design eventually to where we can build sidewalks all the way around the park? Because there's people that walk, but they only go up to a certain point and then they gotta turn back and go back up the other way versus walking all the way around the park. But as far as the grass goes, how high it is, I noticed that only a certain amount of people can go fish in specific areas.
Yeah, so Elizabeth can speak more to the flow and the plan depending on where we land, but for the immediate interim, we are working with Texas Parks and Wildlife on management plan for the shoreline, because while we wait for these things, we know fishing's popular. We've done some recent improvements, but we're working on managing the arundo, the giant reed species around the park, and we want to have the balance. We need to know if this is, this particular grass is invasive, and have some kind of a balance to serve as habitat, but also give the right access to it, and then control. Texas Parks and Wildlife was very happy to hear that we have John Davis on board, and they were working with the conservation district to manage all these things. We're even going to install some fish habitat. They're going to help us. We're working with community members who have been getting really excited about fishing in Lake Park. Chuck, who's a former park board member, has been working with us on that as well. But yeah, that's already underway now. So we should start seeing those improvements in the near future.
Okay, I thought it was that us as a city was holding back on mowing, maybe because it was dangerous or whatever, but because I had a resident ask, why can't they just mow this down so we could have more space to fish? We're not next to other people. And I know as we continue to build Lake Kensington, I didn't know if we're gonna run into that same situation as well. But I think it's a conservation issue with,
It's a matter of those grasses maintain the bank.
That's right.
Okay.
They go down 20 feet, and they maintain that bank line. So you don't want to mow them. You want them
Yeah,
to.
'cause they're high,
continue to grow.
yeah, okay.
That's what they're supposed to do. Now,
Okay.
there may be some invasives in there that we
Right.
don't want, that we
Okay.
can remove, but they're really crucial to the well-being of the lake. So you can clear out some, but you don't want to clear out very much.
Okay, because you also have other species there that help with the environment and keeping it. That's why I'm so
Everything's a
glad we have her
balance.
here, 'cause
Everything's a
I'm not
balance,
I
yeah.
don't know
Everything
this. I'm
works
like,
together.
I'm like, mow it down.
With
so
the new
we can
park
just
standards
float it,
and
but I know that
operating
there's-
procedures, yeah, we're
We don't mow them down.
Yeah.
when Kensington designed, as part of the O&M, there'll be a shoreline management plan that'll be in our operational
Okay.
standards, and we're just doing it retroactively for Lake Cobb, but that is already underway.
The fish and ducks need that as well. Well, but
Yeah,
for the
okay.
shade for the fish, but the ducks breed in that area.
Oh, okay. And that's, I think I maybe mentioned that to you as we go into steeplechase, why certain areas are high, because I had somebody that plays disc golf, was saying, why is, when I used to come out here, it used to be all flat land, and I could see where my disc landed, but now you've got all these grasses in different heights. But I think it's because of like what you're
Exactly,
saying,
that's what
you've
it
got to
is.
have insects and birds got to be able
Yeah.
to nest and all that other stuff.
There is a balance, and we're actively working with the disc golf community to maintain that. So John Davis can speak ad nauseum on this stuff. He geeks out over it. I have to admit, I do too. But
Yeah, me too.
yeah, in some cases he's gone back and said, you know what, how's this working? And they're like, we'd like the fairway to expand here. We're overshooting here into a riparian area. And so John works them and says, well, what if it's like they net neutral on conservation. So he says, if I expand fairway here, can we reclaim some conservation and riparian buffer here? And they're like, you know what, that'll work. And so it's an ongoing collaboration.
Yeah, because I remember when the creek used to be you could be able to see the creek flow behind steeplechase, but now it's high, so.
But it creates erosion if you
Yeah.
don't have that. And what's really cool is all of our parks are getting evaluated for this. We went to Cool Springs with one of the really cool guys from the Great Springs Project. Day before yesterday, or yesterday, I don't remember, I'm losing track of time now. And John and Stacy, and we were talking about those 3 little lakes there and how you preserve that lake, what's there. And he was such an expert. It was so much fun to walk around with him. And even John was going, why didn't my Turk's caps come up? And we were talking about, well, probably because they got too much sun and not enough water. But he was really excited about those 3 lakes because they're spring feds. And I want to get those on the Great Springs Trail list, to stop, come on there because the Vibe Trail goes by there. So I just it's all of our parks that are getting this look for what can we do with nature and integrate the use of the park. We used to have the disc golf there, and the disc would go into the cactus patch. So, I mean, it's so much better at Steeplechase.
Right. Yeah, it's really wonderful to hear that y'all are thinking about this balance and this stewardship throughout your whole park system. And because we're talking about two different parks, we're talking about the same waterway. You know, we're talking about Plum Creek, and you have some really good points that we're going to get to in Steeplechase here in a moment. But I want to make sure that I pause on Lake Kyle long enough. I'd love to hear if you guys have any other comments on the directions that we're going.
My personal preference is for concept B. Do you have a question along that southern conservation area? You've got the Vibe Trail loop going around the perimeter. Is there a reason why you didn't want it to go through the middle? And the only reason I ask is I want to minimize that concrete footprint
Right.
as much as possible. So just trying to get some insight there.
Yeah, and there's, you know, that's not even the final location for that. There is a, you know, there's an impact through the restoration areas that John and his team are working on now if we were to go through with a concrete path. But I think if this concept B is the direction that we want to go, our next step is to start testing where would that trail actually land. And I think that having John's input on where the best spot to put that for the conservation area is going to be important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good point.
And it's very important because the Vibe Trail is designed for motorized vehicles.
Right.
And you do not want to run them through a conservation area.
So I like the fact that in option B, it kind of, the Vibe Trail circulates throughout the park, so it can guide people to other parts of the park and kind of force them out, right? To like go experience other parts of the park. I really appreciate that. I think the other thing is because we host, I think, like a really significant signature event, is there a way in which we can maintain somewhat even half the size of the event lawn in A and the event band shell, and then have that incorporated into B? Like, even, like I said, if it's just half the size, but something just a little bit larger. Just because that's some feedback that I've gotten from residents, is that like sometimes, well, like the area's a little small, it's a little cramped, and I think having something more formal for that also differentiates it from La Verde, because right now that is a smaller event band shell. And so if we're going to be doing something, I would like to be able to have multiple purpose, like multiple different, I guess, venue locations that are different from one another instead of exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think the vision for, you're describing exactly the vision for what we're showing in B. And this right-sized event lawn for what Kyle Fair is today, what Kyle Fair could be in the future, for other festivals of different sizes that you guys are maybe doing now, but maybe want to plan in the future once you have these upgrades in place. The final design or the final concept, the short answer is yes, that something the size of the event lawn I think is very appropriate in concept B, and having the flexibility to have some different band shells or performance area sizes and trail connections is very appropriate in both. So it's a good blend.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking instead of having like the Vibe Trail run directly straight through, could it circle it instead?
Oh, yeah.
So that way we could have that larger event lawn space, but still have the connection to the neighborhood park and the bridge as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, just an idea.
Yeah, no question. That what you're really describing is very appropriate for both of these parks. You're describing our next step. We're going to start thinking about a trail hierarchy throughout the parks. And so really the Vibe is, that's like your freeway. That's where you can have motorized vehicles. That's your concrete path. It's wide enough for a higher volume of users. And then once you get into each park, then we're gonna have to make sure that we right-size the trail loops. And that would be, maybe next would be an 8 or a 6 foot wide concrete trail, all the way down to maybe even nature paths that would still be accessible so that you could get to the conservation area. So I think that's great feedback, and we're gonna study that a little bit more in our next step and make sure there's a hierarchy of trail experiences.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So I like the concept of B as well, but I share the same concern with the Vibe Trail circling around through the conservation area with motorized carts going through. Not sure how that would play out and how we would keep the conservation areas protected from the motorized carts. And then also expanding, like Councilmember Zapata said, the event space in concept B, but still being able to have that bridge over Lake Kyle would be really nice.
I've got a question about
Thank you.
Which would be the east side of the lake. It shows a trail going along the far edge. Is that on the dam or the other side of the dam? Or?
Yeah, so that's a bolder idea that we're testing. It's not actually on top of the dam, so we wouldn't be able to do that through the, just from a water management standpoint. But there is space on the other side of the dam, and it's just wide enough for a trail, and it's kind of a neat natural experience back there. So yeah, we'd like to test the idea of a right-sized trail in that area. It may not be the main core of the Vibe, but it definitely, I think, belongs in that trail hierarchy study that we talk about. Okay. That's great input. Thank you, guys. All right, so now we're at Steeplechase, and so we have our same color scheme of activity areas. And, if I'm going to sum up Concept A and just really what is it about versus Concept B at Steeplechase is we have this same balance of active uses with conservation areas. And in this one, it's a little bit more pronounced, so I'll underline it in this concept. Of course, the red line is the Vibe Trail. But what you notice in A is there is a pretty hard line that red Vibe Trail draws between the green and between all of the other spaces. And that's an intentional design, that's an intentional move in Concept A. In Concept B, it's similar, but you see the conservation areas bleed over onto the other side of the red line. You notice a red trail loop, like we just talked about at Lake Kyle Park. But letter A is really about taking the activities that are there, again, and upgrading them. So you have this neighborhood park that really is big enough to be a community park and serve not just the neighbors that are around it, but broader folks from the community, or a broader range of folks from the community. There are sports fields there, there's your splash pad that's there, the dog park, all of these things that people would use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's to go play a pickup game of softball or go to the playground and splash pad, take their dog to the dog park. You've got a lot of daily use happening at this park every day. So the idea in A is recognizing that your PROS plan also calls for more outlets for athletics and league play. That's already happening at this park. So Concept A takes the idea of league play scale athletics and it brings it into this park. It would have sports lighting that would go along with the sports fields. They would absolutely be located sensitively to the neighbors. They would be dark skies compliant, full cutoff fixtures. The technology on that is so much better than when I first started my career and people started talking about cutoff fixtures. So just, I know that can be a real concern when you're in close proximity to a neighborhood, so I want to make sure to bring that out. You talked about the disc golf and the play along Plum Creek and how it's changed over time. Well, that's not the only way that disc golf has changed Plum Creek. There are areas where there's some erosion that's happening. The course crosses the creek several times, and it can be problematic. So concept A reduces the existing 18-hole course to a 9-hole course so that we can concentrate a little bit more on conserving and helping John and his team restore some of the vegetation that's along Plum Creek. So again, this is about separating these conservation areas, reducing that disc golf presence, but then really playing up your opportunity for athletics there. You've got a high volume, nice parking lot that's about to be installed there. So over 200 spaces. You've got the access for it. And you could meet a need in your overall park system master plan by upgrading athletics here. I will point this out. There's a couple of things that happen in both A and B. Both A and B add additional restrooms to the park. So when you have a lot of families with young kids, I mean, we all know the importance of having restrooms at a park like this, but both of them include more. Both of them include a new splash pad. It's popular. It's a great draw. The one that we have today is in need of some upgrades, and so both of these concepts would suggest a new splash pad design. Both of them revamp disc golf. Letter A does the reduction to the 9-hole course like I talked about, and then B keeps it as an 18-hole course, but it does go in and alongside John, you know, he's not here, he's been mentioned a lot tonight, but he really is the expert that's helping us understand and make sure that we respect the conservation aspects of the park. But
we've got a great disc golf group.
yes.
And what do they say about reducing it to 9?
My concerns are not going to like that very much. They're really passionate about the course, and we have to gently walk through any changes. And so I don't want to. I want to be transparent on that. There are trade-offs in these scenarios. David Lopez has a strong opinion on either one. I'd prefer us to keep 18 holes for this, but you know, this isn't David Lopez Parks and Rec. This is Kyle Parks and Rec.
They use it as a competition course.
It's a very popular
It's very
destination
popular,
course.
and it's known
You're right.
all over. I'm very surprised at how popular it is.
Yeah, and so this scenario is just getting folks to react on the possible trade-offs, because we hear, hey, we want more athletics at the park, but to get that, you got to give up something. And so these options lay things out. Interested to get the input from you all that will likely result in a hybrid, but
Yeah, I know that people come from outside of Kyle. And
Yeah.
I would prefer to see all 18 holes stay.
Yeah, and the group of young men that kind of run Howdy Disc Golf that work a lot with that they're fantastic and they're amazing. And I know that they work with John too. They try to be as careful and cognizant as they can about conservation.
Yeah.
Been a traditional sport that we've had in Kyle, and still keeping us on the roadmap. What do you think on that end?
Right, I think the point is
Yep.
to add and not
Yeah, to take
reduce.
away. There is the need that we keep on talking about. We need more fields for these sports kids, so forth, like the CPFL football, the Invaders, and all them, But you're right, David.
My
We
kids
have a
gotta go to
huge
Wimberley to
park.
play soccer.
Exactly, but at the same time, there's got to be a trade-off. We're going to either reduce the disc golf, or we expand, the basketball courts, or something like that. Even those families are wanting some additionals. I just got an email about the tennis courts and the pickleball. When are those coming to Steeplechase? So it's those. Everybody wants their own individual, which I get, but there's got to be a trade-off. Well, that's also good to hear about the splash pad. We're looking at possibly re-looking at how to, because, when we first put them in, of course, we installed them quickly, but it's good to see that we're taking another third look at them, fourth look, and seeing how we can make improvements.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to keep the 18 holes. I think it's a unique resource. It's kind of like our skate pavilion, the Ash Pavilion. It draws teams from Mexico, from everywhere. And I think this has the possibility of really become very, very popular. And it is very popular, but it's really a draw.
That's good. Well, we have hit Parks and Rec bingo. We've talked about disc golf passionately. That happens at every park that we work at, and I love that, that there's passion for the use of this part of Plum Creek. We've talked about pickleball, and they usually show out in force. But these concepts, they're really, I love this conversation. These concepts are like art, and we want something to stand out to each one of you, and we really want it to elicit a reaction, because that tells us the direction that we're going is either right, or we need to shift, or we need to blend some ideas. So that's perfect feedback. Thank you. Let's see, I may have hit everything in concept A, but just to compare and contrast them again, A, you upgrade your athletics so that you can allow some league play there. In B, think more Sandlot. So there are upgrades. There's some, these are not necessarily lit fields. They're more multi-use, so it's more appropriate for a smaller community park or a neighborhood park level where someone's able to come in and just do a pickup game. It's not all reserved league play, but there's also some neighborhood use to it. So athletics treated very differently in A and B, but both would receive an upgrade regardless.
One of the criticisms we have had about athletics in this park is that people are coming in and using this that are not neighborhood, and that it leaves the neighborhood kids out. So we really need to figure out some way of assuring that we don't have people coming in from other cities. And I don't know if they have permission even to use them, but they're there.
Yeah, I think especially with steeplechase, with the league plays and so forth, lighting has always been, since I moved here back to Kyle in 2004, is that area is just still dark. And I know we talk about the dark skies and everything, but we've had those conversations with just teams that are here in Kyle that want to be able to utilize these parks, and they're having to use their own vehicles, their own cars to turn on the headlights just for them to practice, especially if they're practicing at 6, 7 o'clock at night. So how are we going to work with that? And to go with Councilmember Harris's point, if we have outsiders coming in and it leaves the locals out, the local teams or the local kids that would utilize that, how would we be able to work that balance in that?
In my professional experience, when I look at something like a Concept B, I realize it's not really a destination type field with being multi-use, more of open play, but rated at athletic field. You could incorporate some synthetic turf into the mix as well. Your athletic field photometric shrinks down significantly, as Elizabeth was mentioning. You have to have some lighting though for safe play at all hours. It'd just be sensitive. She also mentioned how the technology is really advanced from when you and I, first started in this. There was no happy medium, and now it's a lot more sensitive to your neighbors. And the LED lighting that photometric is tight. It lights what it's intended to light. And so I think you can accomplish both by virtue of the right design.
Okay, sounds good.
So I think that the differences between how we treat amenities at these is there's so much opportunity. It's such a great resource that's already really well organized. really the amenities at Steeplechase today are spread out just a little bit, right? So you have to intentionally go to different parts of the park. What A does is it consolidates those a little bit more. I think B does that as well. So we have some design options and some design opportunities in both. We would also have the opportunity to have this trail loop in option B and really think about a trail hierarchy, just like we talked at Lake Kyle. And it's interesting, we've got these as two separate concepts. They're a very, very short distance away. And there's a link that the Vibe Trail is going to be able to connect these parks. Really, when you zoom out and look at your whole park system, you've got Kensington, you've got Steeplechase, you have Lake Kyle, you have Waterleaf, you've got this necklace along the Vibe Trail that are these great green spaces. So we really need to be thinking about these as one park, even though this one is very neighborhood focused and we're sensitive to that, and the other one is going to have such a monumental place in the events that you hold there. So they're very different parks, but at the same time they're very connected. So I think this has been great feedback. Do you guys have anything else on Steeplechase or any other questions on that? I think what I failed to do was take you through the simpler slides here. This just shows the activity levels. This shows where we would have parking and access.
Does anybody have any other questions referencing these? Was there any more feedback that you needed for this, or?
No, I think we have what we need.
Okay.
I think we know between the park board comments and then the comments that you guys have given us tonight, I think we know the direction that we need to go in blending these concepts. Our next time to put our ears on and listen is when we engage the public and get their reaction. So I think that's going to be very informative before we go into refining the design further.
David, do you know when we're going to have that? Is it going to be more of an open house that's also going to include the Parks Board?
Elizabeth knows the scope of this like the back of her hand, but yeah, we'll probably have some combination of both like we've done for other larger projects where we have some kind of an in-house gathering and then we do some type of a survey as well. So if you have any feedback on anything you'd like to see in the survey process, we'd be happy to take those thoughts as well.
I'd like to see Steeplechase. I want to see it at Steeplechase. It's really important to get the residents there involved.
Yeah, because we have like at least 3 major neighborhoods in there. You got Prairie Creek, you got Four Seasons, and Steeplechase right there, and South Lake Ranch.
Yeah, Chris Escoto, Deputy Director. So we have had multiple communication with the Steeplechase community. We're actually trying to partner with them to host a sort of kind of charrette and introduce this right under the pavilion. So that is something that we're actively in communication. And we actually, this week, we've been communicating with several members.
That's right, you did speak to Ms. Griffith. She told me that you are having some board, and because we don't have, Steeplechase doesn't have an HOA, but they're starting to band together now and start to give that feedback. And so that's going to really help. And Dr. Harris, Councilmember Harris, really hit it on the head on that one. We need to be able to get the community more involved. Have it on site, kind of an on-site deal, okay, versus coming to the city hall. Yeah.
Love that idea, and the Steeplechase neighborhood will show up.
Oh, they do.
Be there.
Oh, yes.
And then, can we make sure that we do the same thing for like Four Seasons and stuff, like on the other side too?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm sure that's music to their ears. I hope it is, at least, that we have great plans for that. And that was the sort of the dark horse in this race. When Elizabeth and the Dunaway team showed up, they were like, you got a gym here in terms of viewshed and possibilities. And you guys seem more excited about Four Seasons, I think, than Lake Kyle.
Yeah. Yeah, and Steeplechase is one of the original older neighborhoods as far as the parks go, when it first was being built back in the 1990s and 2000s. So I'm glad that we're showing a lot more interest in Steeplechase. They've always been a very stronghold on that side of town, so great.
We're excited to hear that they're going to show up. Actually, I've been at public meetings where myself and the parks representative showed up. And so we love it when people are passionate about their parks and want to give us feedback, because that means the plan has meaning.
Yes.
And we can move forward with something we feel comfortable with.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you guys for your input tonight, and we'll get with David and the team and work on next steps.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here, for coming out. I know it's late in the evening, but again,
Okay.
thank you very much for the presentation on that end. Does anybody have any other feedback you'd like to give? Good. All right, with that, I guess this is the last agenda item. So with that, make a motion to adjourn. Second's been done. Okay, meeting's adjourned.